1 year ago, on February the 24th, 2022, Russian troops stormed across Ukraine's borders from the south, east, and north, triggering a massive conflict. The world braced for the fall of the Ukrainian capital, but against all odds, the resilient Ukrainians fought back with grit and determination, ultimately stopping the Russian invasion. In fact, estimates show that Russia presently commands only 15% of Ukrainian territory, a 10% drop from March last year, where Russians held around 25% of Ukrainian terrain. But the conflict is far from over, and the Ukrainian President Zelensky only recently visited the European Parliament, asking for more support from the EU. In this video, we will cover what the EU has done so far to aid Ukraine, what else Ukraine is asking for, and what the EU will likely do this year. Since the start of the war, the EU has introduced a plethora of measures to try and help Ukraine and deter Russia. These can be categorized in 4 categories. Firstly, there are the sanctions. So far, the EU has adopted 9 sanction packages against Russia, including sanctions against individuals and entities, economic sanctions, restrictions on Russian media, and visa restrictions. The most significant have been the economic sanctions, where the EU has adopted a multitude of measures, such as a swift ban on Russian banks, a closure of EU airspace to Russian aircraft, a ban on imports of oil, coal, and steel, a ban on EU exports of drone engines, and a ban on consulting services to Russians. Secondly, there's financial support. The military, financial, and humanitarian support that the EU and its member states have already given Ukraine totals 67 billion euros, including nearly 12 billion euros in military support. Thirdly, there's refugee support. Estimates suggest that there are currently 4 million refugees in the European Union, with the majority being in Germany, Poland, and Czech Republic. All refugees are protected by the EU's Temporary Protection Directive, which gives them a residence permit in the respective EU country that they are in, with access to accommodation, employment, healthcare, and education. And fourthly, the EU has given Ukraine candidate status, which is the first step towards becoming a member of the European Union. This list is not exclusive of everything that the EU has done. For example, EU's decoupling from Russian gas last year is seen as a massive success, as can be seen in this chart. So check my sources for more information. But even though Ukraine has defied all odds against Russia, the war is far from over. And in a visit to the EU, the Ukrainian President Zelensky called for fighter jets, long-range artillery, ammunition, and missile systems. And his demands are not without reason. A major Russian spring offensive is expected, as Putin has mobilized 300,000 fresh reservists and is positioning fighter jets, bombers, and helicopters to provide air support for a land offensive. It is also believed that 80% of Russia's air force is still in good condition, so we can expect a lot of Russian air support. Next to military equipment, Zelensky has also asked to speed up the negotiations for EU membership.
Ми наближаємось до Євросоюзу. Україна буде членом Євросоюзу. Україна, що перемагає. Членом Євросоюзу. Євросоюзу, що перемагає.
So what will the EU do this year? The EU is already negotiating a record-breaking 10th sanction package, with export bans worth 11 billion euros, including 47 electronic components used in Russian weapon systems. This will likely be implemented soon, but is it enough? The Russian economy is predicted to have shrunk by 2.2 to 3.9% in 2022, which is a lot less than some have hoped for. Next, there's military equipment. The EU is likely to provide additional financial support through their Ukraine Military Aid Fund. The EU will likely also put pressure on member states to provide more heavy weapons, such as fighter jets, and the President of the European Parliament has already voiced her support.
And now, states must consider quickly, as a next step, providing long-range systems and the jets that you need to protect the liberty too many have taken for granted.
Poland and Slovakia were the first members to also voice their support, but they will unlikely deliver any hardware without commitment from all of NATO. This might be difficult though, as countries such as Germany are cautious of escalation. Then there's EU membership. Here the EU needs to make a choice, to either treat Ukraine's EU accession by the usual procedure or speed things up through political will. If we go down the usual procedure route, then it's unlikely that negotiations will start this year, as Ukraine simply does not meet all the requirements. But political will may play a large role here, meaning that the EU member states may unanimously agree on starting the next round, even if requirements are outstanding. We will know more in March when the European Commission is likely to present its position. Then there's also the rebuilding of Ukraine. Members of the European Parliament have voiced support for the use of frozen assets of the Russian Central Bank, as well as assets of Russian oligarchs, to finance post-war reconstruction. Here's what we think. Sanctions are here to stay and will continuously be expanded. Financial aid will also continue to flow, and sooner or later, fighter jets and more military equipment will likely make it to Ukraine. In terms of EU membership, we are skeptical of accession talks starting this year, as it only requires one member state to veto the idea. However, something that is not talked about is the EU's position towards eventual peace talks. How does this all end? Of all major Western leaders, France's President Macron has most persistently referred to the inevitability of negotiation with Mr. Putin's Russia. In the past, he has argued that peace talks must include security guarantees to Russia. This has sometimes irritated Zelensky and other NATO states bordering Russia, who have long seen their Western allies as being naive about the threat of Russian aggression. They believe that only an outright defeat of Mr. Putin, whatever that may mean, is acceptable. The question is, though, is this realistic, or does Macron have a point? And should the EU play a larger role in case Putin wants to come to the negotiation table? Let us know, and if you enjoyed these short and informative videos about the EU, then please subscribe and like the video. And if you want to support the channel, please consider signing up to Patreon. Until next time.